Okay, Tori Hope Petersen with an EN,
Yes, not Owen. Tell them.
right? Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. And I have so many things I want to talk to you about. So we're just gonna, try and get as much in as we can. How's that sound?
That sounds great. I'm so excited and
Yay.
happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, can you just introduce yourself to everyone first?
Yes, my name is Tori Hope Petersen. I live in Defiance, Ohio with my husband, my two biological children. I have an adopted adult son as well, and my biological sibling lives with us too. I am most commonly known for telling my story of growing up in foster care and overcoming through my faith, through my family, and through just learning what I was called to do and who I was called to be.
Mm-hmm. You have an amazing story. And like I said, I have so much I want to talk to you about because your story is so amazing. So, first I want to say that I've been following you for a while on Instagram. And then I've heard you interviewed on some of my favorite podcasts, like the Happy Hour. But your viral video where you're holding up the signs and kind of telling your story through the signs, that when I saw that, that was probably the catalyst for me that was like, oh, it's okay for me to be honest with my followers about my history, my story, the abuse that I experienced in childhood, but then also, in an abusive marriage and my teen pregnancy, just all the things that it was like, I was like, no, I don't need to talk about that. But so I just want to thank you because I think you were probably the catalyst, not only for me, but for so many other women and survivors to be able to say, this is my story and it doesn't define me, but it definitely plays a role in who I am today.
Oh, thank you. That means so much. I mean, I just believe with all my heart that stories are so powerful. And yeah, we don't have to shy away from the hard things that have happened in them. And I think that I thought that at some point, just like everybody else usually does at some point, that we can't just like share these dark places. I especially think, as we are put in places of leadership, people think, oh, we have to be so put together so that people
Yeah.
follow us. But I think really we just have to be relatable so that people say, what is in you that makes you like this? And then hopefully we can say Jesus and they
Mm-hmm.
can be pointed towards the person, the being that's actually worth following. And that's him. But, when I was in college and when I was I'm a young adult now, I'm only 27, but when I was a younger adult, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
I was sharing on social media and I started sharing on social media, not consistently, but it was just a means for me to process through the abuse and what I was going through and how I was healing. And people would reach out to me and they would say, we heard your story and we're adopting our daughter today. We've been fostering her for 2 years and now we're adopting her because we heard your story. Or, me and my husband were thinking about going into foster care and you were the tipping point. Hearing what God did through your story was the tipping point. Or me and my husband, we were going to go into foster care and only foster babies. And now we're fostering older kids. And I was just like, that's when I just realized after so many messages. It was just like, okay, I think that this story has to have a concrete place, which is why one of the reasons why I wrote my book. But also, I think our stories, not just mine, but everyone's, is so worth telling because we never know who
Mm-hmm.
it's going to touch and what effect it's going to have on their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, your story is having an effect on a lot of people's lives. So thank you for kind of taking the lead with that. I appreciate that. Um, okay, so let's talk pageantry for just a second.
Oh
Okay,
Lord, she's
so
going there.
I
First
know,
thing.
but listen, it's funny because when I was a teenager, we're going to get into this in a second, but I was raised in a pretty chaotic home um, And so when I was a teenager, I was just like searching for my self-worth and to fill that hole. And it was through boys and alcohol and, cheerleading. I was a cheerleader and I loved it, but it like filled me up. I was performing. I was like, people were seeing me and wanting to see me perform. And so I decided that I wanted to do the Miss Teen Washington pageant when I was in high school. And so I did that, and it really was because I was searching. I was searching for something to define me as beautiful. And so I came in the top 12, which means I got a trophy. I should have brought it down here to show you. But I have this trophy sitting in my closet, and it still sits in my closet. And it's like this reminder for me of not that defined who I was. I realized after lots and lots of hurt, so probably not until my later 20s, that wasn't what defined me. My outside beauty was not what defined me. It was really what was inside of me, that I'm a survivor, that I'm strong, that I'm capable, that I'm worth more than I ever imagined. And so that trophy sits in my closet just as a reminder of just that I'm a survivor, and that trophy belongs in my closet because it doesn't define me. It's just a part of who I am. And I've heard you talk about the Mrs. Universe title that you held in 2022, last year?
21.
21. Sorry about that. And similar, that you don't see it as something that defines you, but it's a part of you.
Honestly, I think that trauma has this weird thing that it does to your brain. I just get bored. And I'm very much like, let's try all the things. It was very much for like fun. And I think that I always thought that pageantry was very superficial, kind of judged it. I always said I would never do a pageant. And then like when I laid my head down on my pillow and I was separated a little bit from my mom life, wearing my sweats day in and day out, I was like, wow, that actually sounds really fun to like dress up and to get my hair done and to get my makeup done. I was actually just getting into speaking, and like I didn't know how to do my hair, I didn't know how to do my makeup. And I was like, this actually just sounds like really fun. And so someone actually presented the opportunity to me. I was like, talked to my husband, said yes. And then I think throughout it, I just love competition. Like I love competition. And I personally don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with like competition or having a yearning for like performance if you do it in the name of Jesus and you do it for the glory of God. I think some of us are just wired that way. And like if it's for, I think that God has just made some of us, like if you think about mega church pastors who are doing the work for the glory of God, yeah, the Holy Spirit works through them, but there has to be some kind of element of, they're getting on a stage and they have to perform. They're funny and they're smart and they're witty and they're preaching the word of God, and they have to like learn how to communicate it well. Right. And so I think that there's an element to being performative that, yeah, it can be superficial if we let it be, if we let our hearts harden, but there's also an element of being performative that may just be like how God made us. And so, and I love competition. I think that if you are a competitive person, you should probably try and find healthy places in your life to compete. So you're not like competing against friends or competing against family, because when you're competitive, like things can just bleed into that. And so those were just things that I was all aware of. And I was like, let's go like do this competition. This sounds fun. And again, like I just had a platform. I like didn't need, and I wasn't yearning for a platform. I was looking for something to do more. Like I didn't have a bunch of speaking engagements. I wanted something to do, like, because I was just getting started. I just wanted something to do like outside of my mom life. That's really what it was. And I was also, I had gotten to the point in my book deal where I had written the book, and it was like going through the editing process, which I waited like 6 months for. And so like I was literally just in this lull of like my work. And so I was like, let's go do a pageant. It was super fun. Like I totally don't regret it.
I love that. Yeah. So I just appreciate that you don't use that title to like define you or say, you should listen to me because I'm Mrs. Universe. You know, you're just
Yeah. And
very,
I think that's kind of what I realized is that like,
mhm,
so like I said, I was kind of like just stepping into speaking, didn't have a lot of speaking engagements, had asked people to be on their podcast and they, said no here, no there. And then when I won the title of Mrs. Universe, people were like, come be on my show, come be on my
mm,
podcast. Do you want to speak here and there? And I was like, this is not something that I want to define. Like, I
yeah,
want people to look at my character and ask me to
yeah,
speak. I want people
right,
to see what God has done in my life and ask me to speak. And so it was actually like, I don't want to get speaking engagements or I don't want to get opportunities because of a title, because
right.
I didn't want that to be who I was.
Yeah.
Someone gave me a book by Henry Nouwen in my later college years. It's called In Jesus' Name. And in the very beginning of the book, he tells this story about, he was a well-known author, a well-known speaker, and he goes and works in this home for adults with special needs. And he said like nobody knew him. So it was super awkward.
Mm,
And he
mhm.
had to like just earn their respect, these adults' respect by having good character. And that's just
Yeah.
always stuck with me. Like I don't want to be known for the titles. I want
Yeah.
to be known for having good character, for
Yeah.
making people feel important and loved.
Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel better, I just found out that you were Mrs. Universe like a week ago. So I was like, that's not, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is bigger than I thought, but
Yeah. And I'm sure there was like some searching in it. It was really, I'm just like, oh, it's like, what's the next thing? I don't know, people feel all types of way about Enneagrams, especially if they're Christian, but I think it's really interesting. I'm not like dying to it, but I'm a 2-wing 3 and my
mm,
3 is massive.
yeah.
And there is, I don't ever look back. Like I've never even like went since my book's been printed, like never even went back and like read my book. I've never went back and listened to a podcast that I've done.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'd never look back and I'm always like, what's the next thing? And I was just in this phase where I was like, I don't really know what the next thing is, but I have this really big
Hmm.
lull in between the next things. So let's do
Here we
pageantry.
go. Yeah. Here we go. That's
And I learned
awesome.
how to do my makeup and hair. So
Well, see, there you go.
yes.
Okay, so let's change topics here a little bit. And I'd love to talk about trauma. This podcast is about trauma and parenting. And so I just kind of have some things related to trauma that I would love to just hear your thoughts on. So the first one is your mom's mental health. I was raised in a home with a parent who had schizophrenia. And so when I was reading your book, there was just moments where I was like, yes, like it was like right there. I was right there with you. And so I'm just curious on your thoughts on how that has played a role, the trauma that you experienced because of something your mom couldn't even control. It was her mental health. It wasn't like she was choosing to do some of that stuff. So how has that played a role in who you are today?
Yeah, so I'd say that the trauma like evolves the way that it affects me, the way that it's affected me throughout my life. From a really young age, I have always probably been a bit of, I don't know, I wouldn't say a perfectionist. It's not that. Like I've
Mhm.
never had to be like things are perfect, but always quite worried about if things are right, like if I'm
Mhm.
doing things right. And as I've become a Christian and as I've cared more about my faith and my character, it can almost be detrimental. Always wondering, like, am I doing this right? Would God look at me and say, well done, my good and faithful servant?
Mm.
Creates kind of like, God, one of the calls that God wants us has on our lives is to just enjoy him.
Mm.
And I don't know if I've quite figured out how to do that. That was actually going back to the pageant thing. One of the reasons when I was praying about the pageant, I thought that I just heard from the Lord, like, just enjoy me. And I
Mm,
was like, maybe this could be something that I could just enjoy God in. And that was part of it, is I just had a lot of fun doing it. It was
mm,
out of the very like service oriented work that I was doing in terms of foster care and advocacy.
mhm.
And I think that that's how it plays out now in my life, is just kind of like this fear of, am I
Mm.
going to ruin something? Am I going to do something wrong? Um, and I don't know. I think it's just so complex. It especially is in my parenting, because I was
Yeah.
so hurt in the way that I was parented. I really want to be like this very, very good
Yeah.
mom. And I'm always thinking about the decisions that I'm making for my children. I'm always thinking about core memories, what will they
Mhm. Yeah.
remember? What will they not remember? Um, and so, yeah, I don't know. I think that there's just so many answers. Like, I think I could give you a better answer if you more said, like, how does trauma affect you in your marriage? Or how does trauma affect you in your
Yeah.
parenting? Because it just affects every
Every
single thing.
part. Mhm.
And it has changed all throughout my life. The way that it manifested as a child is it's different the way that it manifested when I was a teenager, and different in college, and different now.
Yep.
Um, but I would say the underlying thing that has always been there is, am I doing it right? Like,
Yeah.
am I making a mistake?
Mm.
Just always that fear of doing something wrong.
Do you think that that plays into even, like, generational trauma? Like, you talked about your mom and her mom, and, like, there's this idea that this trauma just keeps it's like a cycle. Like, it's this cycle of we don't know what we don't know. And so some of it is mental health, some of it is this is just the way I was raised and nobody has told me that there's anything wrong with it. And so I'm just going to perpetuate it. Do you think that plays into it?
Yeah, I think what plays into it the most is that my biological mom, I would say, is very unaware of the way that she's hurt people,
Hmm.
and the ways that her living affects people, I guess, is how I
Hmm.
would say it. And so I think that I fear that I am just that unaware. Like, I wonder,
Mm.
like, am I so unaware that I could be trying to do everything right, but I'm actually hurting people? Because I don't think my mom is like trying to just go
No,
around hurting people. Like,
no.
she just is. And
Right.
I can tell my mom, hey, that really hurt me. Or my biological sister lives with me full time. And I can say something like, that was really hurtful towards her. And she's like, I wasn't hurtful. Like, I didn't
Mm.
say that. And like, oh, you definitely said that. And I was definitely very hurtful. So just like a complete lack of awareness. And I'm always wondering, like, what am I not aware of? Like, what am I not seeing that is affecting the people around me? Which
Yeah.
then adds to the fear of, am I doing everything right?
Right. You said in the book, anxiety engulfs me the same way it did my mother. And you describe it like having glue and glitter on you that you just can't scrub off. And I feel like that's the picture of generational trauma, of this, like, we're born with this glitter on us, and good or bad, whatever it is, how do we get it off? How do we start moving in a direction without the glitter?
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, that's actually the funny thing about glitter, is that you kind of always have some on you.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so much freedom in that. Like, so I host these retreats for survivors of abuse and trauma. People come from backgrounds of foster care. We've had cult survivors, we've had human trafficking survivors, and we just really focus on, what does it mean to heal? Like, really,
Hmm.
what does it mean to heal? And something that I tell them is that I talk about how Jesus slept through the storm.
Mm.
And so, like, there's a storm that happens in our minds, and there's a storm that happens in our bodies when we have trauma. And it may never go away. Like, the storm may lessen,
Hmm.
but it's possibly always going to come back and rain and lightning and thunder.
Hmm.
And so, what do we do? Like, how do we learn how to be storm sleepers? And because God gives us like the same power that Jesus had to sleep through the storm, He gives us the
Yeah.
same power to do that with our minds and with our bodies, to sleep through it. And so I always just encourage them, like, there's freedom. And I think people come to me and ask me, how have you healed? There's so much freedom when they hear like, well, I'm not like fully healed.
Yeah,
I'm
right?
still healing. And I don't think I'm going to be healed until I'm eyes to eyes with
With
God in
Jesus. Yep.
heaven.
Yep.
But like, I just continue to work on it.
Mhm.
And I just continue to like kind of brush the glitter off or sleep through the storm as the days come. But I really
Yeah.
think, if there's one thing that has healed me more than anything else, I'll give two things because it really is two. It's connection. It's people
Mhm.
who have been in my life and who have loved me. But the really special thing that those people have done is that they have told me who I am and
Mhm.
who God is. And that has allowed me to step into a calling that has been very, very healing. It's allowed me to see God for who he is as my father. It's allowed me
Mhm.
to understand that I am so loved. And I don't mean like God is not like that God stuff. It's not a band-aid. Like he's a balm. You put it on and it's like this slow healer. You don't cover it up. It's still like an open wound, but it begins to heal slowly, just like
Mhm.
balm does. And um yeah, I just think the connections with people and the way that they've helped me find my calling.
Yeah.
It shows me that I have purpose, that the pain that I went through is not wasted.
Right.
And it shows me, because I know that the pain, the suffering that I've endured will not be wasted when I go through suffering now. I'm encouraged. I just
Mhm.
know that like it's not going to be wasted, that it's going to be used for good, just as everything else has.
Yeah, that's good. What about, it just, okay, let me get my thoughts here together. Um, I worked in the field of child welfare for 18 years, and some of that was as a social worker at CPS, at the department. And um, I had to leave because I saw too many foster parents who were either in it for money or were unwilling to learn a new way of parenting that actually could help foster kids heal, which didn't involve fear based discipline. And I'm not just talking about spanking because obviously that's not allowed in foster care. I shouldn't say obviously because some people don't know that, but spanking is not allowed in foster care. I'm talking like even some of the things you talked about in the book, where like the charts and earning points and being, like you had to basically live under this fear of, am I going to get in trouble? And how do I make sure I don't get in trouble? And so I had to leave working for CPS because of that, because it was just, and the reality is a lot of those foster parents that I had a hard time with were Christians. And so that was just hard for me because I love Jesus. And I was like, no, Jesus would not do this. But I read stories about like Donna and Sue, some of the foster parents you had in the book. Um, and it really was about that fear-based discipline versus the connection that you just were talking about, the people who connected with you. So, like, how do we get people to realize that sometimes this is about how the foster parents, how how can they do better for our kids?
Yeah. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the story that you alluded to in the book. So I lived in a residential group home, and we had point sheets that they kept track of all of our good behaviors and our bad behaviors. So good behaviors were positive points that we would write down and record, and then bad behaviors were negative points that we would write down and record. And we like literally were tracked for every
Mm,
single action, for every single behavior. And when I was an adult, that group home asked me to come back and speak and encourage their kids.
mhm,
And we went out for a staff lunch. And the leader, or like I should say, supervisor of the staff, looked at me and with tears in her eyes. And I mean, just everyone started to have tears in their eyes as soon as she started talking. And she just said, I'm so sorry
mm,
for the way that we engaged in your behaviors. Like,
mm,
I'm so sorry for the way that like we kept track of, because I would get like maybe one negative point like every 2 or 3 days. And it was
mhm,
pretty normal for like girls in the home to get like 6 to 10 negative points per day. So I got like 1 for every like 3 days, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, when I got it, it would crush me.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
would go to my room and I would write in my journal what I could have done better. And I would
Mm.
write it over and over again. And I was like, next time I will do better. Next time I will do better. Next time I will do better.
Mm.
Over and over again. And when we were sitting in that around that table waiting for our lunch, she was just like, I'm so sorry. We just didn't have the resources on trauma that we do
Mm.
now. And every time I think back to your time here, I just regret how we taught you. And we should have encouraged you. And
Mm.
we should have just spoke words of life into you. Because
Yeah.
my mom would actually come and visit me at the group home and they would experience what that was like.
Yeah.
And they were just like, I don't know what we were doing. Like
Yeah.
there just wasn't resources then. So, that was 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something first that we need to acknowledge. I do think that things are getting better. But yes, there are still foster parents and adopted parents that really need more education. And I
Yeah.
think that that's where it starts. I mean, it's always, I can like hone in on community so much. Like being community, you need accountability. You need
Yeah.
people to call you out on your parenting and in your marriage.
Yeah.
But another thing is just like humility to remain teachable.
Exactly. That
My
growth
husband,
mindset.
yeah, my husband and
Yeah.
I, around Chris, so people like, because of social media, people contact us and we've had people reach out to us and ask us to like take their kids in. They know
Mm.
that's something that we do, or
Mhm.
we've done in the past. And so this past Christmas, we had an adoptive family reach out to us. Their adoption was like on the brinks, basically, like it was
Okay.
rupturing. And they're like, we don't want our daughter here for Christmas. We need you to take her.
Mm.
It was a very sad situation. And we were just
Yeah.
like, well, I went into foster care 2 days before Christmas. And so
Yeah.
it was just like an absolute yes for us.
Right.
She came to live with us. And, I just encouraged them, like adoption is a covenant, very similar to marriage. It's a promise that we make um, under God. And
Yeah.
so they asked us to take her till she was 18. And we said, we'll pray about it. But what we would really want you to consider is that, your adoption is a covenant. And if you do want to move forward with us taking her full time, we think that she should probably go into the foster care system because when she turns 18, she'll have like this endless, because they were like, we want to be done with her. So we were like,
Mm.
well, she will have like this endless amount of resources when she turns
Yep.
18. She wanted to go to college. She was very high achieving, 4.0 student. So we were like, let's get her in the foster care system if you want her to be with us full time, so that when she's only 2 years from turning 18. So we were like, when she turns 18, she'll get free college, she'll get free
Yeah.
housing, she'll have all these endless resources. If you guys really just like want to be done with her, because I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't think we could offer her ever all of that.
Yeah.
But we could offer her a home.
Yeah.
And they just grew like very angry. They thought that we were
Mm.
saying like that they were bad parents. And like,
Shoot.
because only bad parents, kids go into the foster care system. And I think like just immediately, I mean, they like everything was going great. And they just came and picked her up. And it was like, no, that's not what I was saying. Like I was trying to explain to you that actually like I'm just trying to advocate for what's in the best interest of your
Yeah.
daughter. And so I think that's just a great example of like a lack of humility or not
Yep.
willing to like learn. They had it was an international adoption. So they didn't know much about the foster care system. There were just,
Mhm.
kind of like stereotypes about what the foster
Yep.
care system meant. So all that considering, I think if we want to do what's best for children, if we want to advocate for what's in their best interest, we have to just remain humble and we have to
Yeah.
remain teachable. Something else that I've seen is like, there is kind of like, there's the adoptive and foster parents that like, right, you see them on social media, they're very active, they're engaging with former foster youth and adoptees and they're listening to them and they go to the conferences. And then there's like foster and adoptive parents that like don't do any of that. And it does kind of worry me because
Mhm.
it's such a complex thing that we have to learn about.
Yeah.
And when we listen to others about anything, that's why we tell
Yeah.
our stories. That's why we live in community, because we learn from one another.
Yeah. Yeah. You are so great at giving social workers grace. And
Mhm.
throughout your whole book, I was just like, I used to be a social worker. She's being way too nice to them. Because here's the thing. You talk a lot about how, I don't remember the exact words you use, but basically, if you are a healed person, you can help heal others. If you're hurting, you hurt others. And I saw that a lot with my coworkers. When I left CPS, I worked for a nonprofit foster care agency for 10 years. And same thing, I was working with a lot of social workers, and I just saw that like the ones that were healthy and healing and in a good space, they were helping other families heal. And the ones that are hurting, burnt out, maybe are not humble enough to realize like they're um, facing life through their own lens of their own hurts and traumas, they're hurting other people. And I just want to read this part from your book. You say, caseworkers being overworked and underdeveloped spiritually, mentally, and emotionally is one of the reasons that siblings sometimes get separated. It's why some children continue to be placed into home after another. It's why trauma continues to manifest in many vulnerable youth. And you go on. It's much more than that, but I just feel like that's it right there. Like, how do we get caseworkers to see that they have to be healthy and whole in order to make sure that the system, because we are bound by government stuff. There is government stuff, and judges have a lot of power, but also like as a caseworker, we have to be healthy and whole in order to be able to bring that healing to the foster youth, the foster parents, the bio parents, the people that we're working with.
I think I can say that I have grace for caseworkers and social workers because the system is not set up for them to be healthy and whole.
Mm-hmm.
They get caseload after caseload after caseload. There are caseworkers that have over 100 kids.
Yeah,
And
right.
when you are getting calls and emails every day about removing 10 kids living in a single foster home because there's abuse reported, or
Yeah,
you're getting a phone call about a child that has to be removed from their first family immediately because of abuse, and you're getting a phone call about a potential adoptive family inquiring for youth who's been in foster care for 5 years, like it's like, and then you get subpoenaed to court. Like, which one do you
yeah,
answer first?
exactly. Yep.
And, like, we're only human. And then, there's, of course, that was all just about the kids, but you have to add caseworkers are also usually responsible for biological parents' rehabilitation,
Yep.
as well as visiting and making sure that foster parents are well equipped and trained. And it's just like, I mean, it's just an impossible job. Like, so I
Yeah.
give them grace because the system is not set up to make them good at their job.
Yeah.
But they're the
I agree.
person that has
Yeah.
the most responsibility for the children and families and
Yep.
care. And so we wonder, like, why is the system like falling apart? Well, it's because the people who are in charge of it, who have the most responsibility, are falling apart because we
Yeah.
put too much on them.
Yeah, absolutely. We put too much on them. And then also like the lack of requirement to know about trauma informed care and trauma awareness. I think that plays a role in it too. Like, I just think there's so many social workers that don't understand trauma, and
Yeah.
then they're making decisions that are potentially more harmful, cause more trauma to our kids. So anyway, I just appreciated how much grace you give case managers, because it's necessary, it's needed. And as much as I still feel like we can do better as social workers, but that means us looking at ourselves and being able to do the hard work ourselves. There also is a need for people who are willing to step into it. So, okay. So I don't know if you have heard of Josh Shipp before. He's a
I haven't.
motivational speaker, and he also was raised in foster care. And
Oh,
he
wow.
says every kid is one caring adult away
Oh,
from a
yes, I
success
do know who
story.
this guy is.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
I was just like, kept thinking of that quote over and over every time I would read about someone else in your story.
When I was 12 years old, I went to, oh, sorry, that
Oh,
was my
no, you're
computer.
good.
I went to, oh my gosh. sorry, go ahead.
You're good. But when you talked about like Mr. Rodenberger, Tanya, Tammy, Sarah, Gigi, Scott, all of these, one adult, right? Like you had multiple that were speaking, and you've already said this earlier about, how they're just speaking life over you, helping you realize like who you were created to be and that you are loved. How do you think that they all played a role in your quote unquote success?
Yeah, they all played a role. And I think that has always been, I know that guy because I know his quote. And I've always thought it's interesting because I don't know, he was probably a real good kid. He probably only needed one adult, but I needed like 20. Like I needed a whole community. And so and I really do believe it takes a village.
Yeah.
Like that's a quote, a cliche for a reason.
Yeah.
And so I believe that it takes an army. And when we believe that, because the thing is, when we say, oh, it only takes one adult, then the mindset of the adults, of the people who are thinking about getting engaged is, well, it can be that adult, not me. But when the mentality is it takes a village, it takes a community, then everyone's going to get involved and everyone's going to find their part and pick up their piece.
Yeah. Well, and I always talk about like, when I talk about kids, they're our kids. Like we all have kids in our lives, whether it's in our home or the neighbor, or if I'm a teacher or a social worker or a coach, they're our kids. And we are all responsible to be present and connected in their lives. And so I just was blown away by the support you had growing up and the people that stepped in and weren't afraid to be in your life.
Yeah. That's I always say, like, I was actually at a speaking engagement on Saturday and they asked me about my community and I called them the unicorn community because it really does feel like and sound like they're just like unreal.
Yeah.
It's just like unreal.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you make sure that you're staying healthy for your husband and your kids and the, the people that you have coming in and out of your home? How do you stay healthy?
I mean, there's like the biological aspect of it. I sleep a lot. Like I sleep a lot. I probably sleep like 9 to 10 hours every single night.
Yes.
And
I'm with you.
My husband takes, I'm shameless that my husband takes mornings and I work at night. I usually only work during my children's nap time so I can be present for my children. I notice that when something that I've noticed is when I am not able to be present for my children, I grow resentful of my husband because he does get, like, if he does get to be with the kids, I'm like, oh, you get to be with the kids. And I don't because I'm working or whatever. And so I usually like all my work is compounded in like these 3 hours in the day and then a lot at night and my children are sleeping. And then travel, of course, like that's not counting travel.
Yeah.
And then I just am more selective. And I know it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be more selective on the work that you're able to say yes and no to. And I know that not everyone gets that, but that is something that's been that has changed and has allowed me to remain much healthier. Again, like this is all biological stuff, but like I eat very well. I work out and I actually teach a workout class.
You do?
Yes, for the YMCA because it keeps me going to work out. Like I obviously I did track, but I don't think I would work out. I've always taught workout classes since since I stopped running track, since I graduated college. And it is like, it just gets me in the gym. It gets me to keep working out. And I know that I wouldn't work out if I didn't have to be there and other people weren't counting on me.
Yeah. What do you teach?
You really want to know what it's called?
Yeah.
It's called Booty Build.
I love that.
So it's like very women centric.
Okay.
And it's the name is what gets people in there because every woman wants a better butt. So,
That's
like
right.
if you call it like high intense. It really, what it is it's HIT, like it's high
Okay.
intensity
Okay.
interval training. But if you call it that, like that's intimidating. No one's gonna
Gonna
come.
come.
But if you call it
No.
booty build, people are like, well, I want a nice butt. So then they
Build
come.
my booty. Yeah.
Yes. And
That's
then there's the
awesome.
spiritual, the spiritual
Yeah.
aspect is like, I am not perfect but at it, but I would say that I'm pretty disciplined in
Mhm.
reading scripture, and reading books, and being with people, being in community, and sharing my life with those around me.
Mhm.
Especially, because I'm on the road a lot, traveling and speaking. And so it's really important to me that I come home and that I engage with the people here.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good. So how has storytelling helped you find your own healing?
It just helps you process, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's like, I feel like it's like fast forwarding therapy.
Mhm.
Like, because even, in the realm of pageantry, that's just where we started. So now we have to keep going back there. But there's so many layers to that. Like, there was trauma in it of like
Mhm.
the injustices and the inappropriateness.
Mhm.
But there's also like, and I always feel like I'm still processing the pageant journey and like, why did I do that? And like,
Mhm.
what was the purpose of that? And there are some things that I just am content with, like, okay, I don't know if I'm ever going to fully know,
Yeah.
but just in like talking about things, with people and then coming to me, like I said in the beginning, like they come to you and they say, I was thinking about doing the pageant, but instead, like I heard you talk about it on your podcast, and instead, like I decided to launch a podcast because I realized that
Mm.
wasn't going to be the environment for me. I had
Yay.
someone send me that
Yeah,
message the other day. They launched a
that's
podcast. They're
awesome.
like, they're like, I wanted my voice to be heard, and I wanted other people's stories to be amplified, and I realized that probably wasn't going to be the culture for me. And so I started a podcast, and now they said they have like over 5,000 downloads, which I don't really know, like in terms of
Yay.
podcasts, if that's like good or what. Like
I mean, if you're just starting out,
I have like
25 is
no
good.
metrics. Yeah, I don't even know like any metrics in terms of podcasts, but
Yeah.
I was like, good. So
Yeah.
I just think that storytelling in any capacity, we can make sense of it when it helps other people.
Yeah.
We can make sense of our past and our pain when we see that there was some reason for it for us or for someone else.
Yeah. So you have founded the Beloved Initiative.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, the Beloved Initiative is a
Okay.
501(c)(3) nonprofit, and we gather survivors from all different kinds of backgrounds, and we guide them through the process of storytelling and
Mm.
healing. Um, and they don't have to like go and be on podcast or talk on stage or write a
Yeah.
book. But we just want to guide them through the power that their story has. And we want to rid the shame that sometimes our
Mm.
stories hold.
Yep.
And we want to validate them. A lot of them have been called liars in their story. We want to tell them that we believe them, and we want to put them in a community. Again, going back to community, we want to put them in a community because so many times we have a lot of people who come to us from backgrounds of foster care, of course, because that's my background, but also
Yeah.
just like abuse. And usually, if there's abuse when you're a child, for some reason, you are broken away from your family. And so there's the loneliness of being separated from your family, but there's also the loneliness of believing that no one understands what you've went through. And so when we put these survivors in a community and they're together and they're like, oh, this person gets me, like
Yeah.
they walk out and they say they just feel so seen, they feel so heard, they feel like they have a family finally. And all of that, is just a part of this healing journey that we're all on.
Yeah. How do people hear about it? Is it like apply or is it word
Yeah.
of mouth? How does that
So
work?
you can go to thebelovedinitiative.org and you apply. We have over 150 waiting applicants
Wow.
to attend our retreats,
Mhm.
and it's a matter of funding. So if
Okay.
you want to support this work, you just go to belovedinitiative.org. A huge part of our work is that because of the survivors that come from these backgrounds, they often don't have the means to attend something like this. And
Yeah.
that's why we make it affordable for every single survivor by finding sponsors and by
Okay.
having generous donors. And we make it possible for them, right? Because healing retreats and therapy, it's
Hmm.
all a great cost. And
Yeah.
that's why we see that survivors struggle to get stable. It's
Yeah.
because they don't have access to different healing modalities in which they should. And so we
Yeah.
want to create it. We've made something that's affordable, that's doable. We've had people attend our retreats for free of cost to them.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and we've had people come to Jesus through our retreats. And
Mm.
so, and that's what the ultimate healing is. But we just guide them through, what does it look like to heal? What does it look like to forgive our
Hmm.
abusers?
Oh, yeah.
What does it look like to walk with other people who are learning
Hmm.
to forgive and heal? And what
Hmm.
does it look like to remain strong in community, even when our community has hurt us, and not abused us, but hurt us?
Yeah.
Um, and just all those things we talk
Yeah.
about so that they can leave stronger.
That's awesome. Um, okay. We're gonna wrap things up, but I have two more questions for you.
All right.
What do you wish more people asked about healing from trauma?
Hmm. Well, I think another a really important part of our healing retreats is that we function from this idea that the most effective way of healing is to contradict the traumatic experience.
I
Um,
love that when you said that in the book. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So, there are different ways to heal trauma. Obviously, medication, obviously, there's different modalities of therapy. But the most healing, like most effective way is to have just experiences in your life that contradict the traumatic experience. So, say you have trust issues, right? Like something
Mhm.
that we could all struggle with. But if you have people that are continuing to show up in your life and prove themselves trustworthy, you're going to
Mhm.
begin to trust people because they're
Mhm.
contradicting the thing that you had trauma with, which was untrustworthy people.
Right.
If you're a woman and there's a man in your life that has constantly been abusive to you, then you can, very, very common thought is, oh, all men are bad. But then if men
Mhm.
come in your life and there's these really good men that prove themselves
Mhm.
good and healthy and loving, you're going to say, oh, not all men are bad. Not all
Mhm.
men are abusive. There are men that are loving and kind
Mhm.
and caring. Because someone contradicted the belief, the trauma that
Mhm.
that belief formed. And so what we do in our retreats is that we take all of our survivors to beautiful places. Wherever our retreat is held, it's held in a beautiful house. We pay for them to get into the national park or into the beautiful park nearby.
Mhm.
And we do that because a lot of them have been isolated. A lot
Yeah.
of them, like we have human trafficking survivors who literally lived in isolation. We
Yeah.
have people in foster care whose policies revolving their case lived in isolation.
Yep.
And so we're going to bring them out. We're going to show them you can go places, and we're going to
Mhm.
show them that this is a place that's going to contradict what you've experienced.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. I love that because I'm glad you brought that up because that was something that I underlined in the book and love how you describe that. So, okay, what would be three resources that you would recommend to someone who is starting their healing journey?
Hmm. Okay. The Body Keeps the Score is absolutely necessary, but don't read it like a novel. That was the mistake
Right.
I made. You will be wildly triggered. Read it like a textbook. Pick it up, put it down.
Yep.
I
Right in
actually
it.
got through the whole thing because I was like, what is wrong with me? And then I realized everyone was like, Tori, you're not supposed to read it like it's a memoir. I was like, that's the only way I read books. Like, just read
Yeah.
them straight through. Like I said,
Right.
I don't ever look back. So I can't pick and choose. I just gotta plow through it.
Get through it.
Don't do that with that book.
Got it.
If you're healing.
Right, right, right.
Um, I am reading a book right now. I wish I knew the name. I'm literally reading the book. Hold on. I want to go find the name
Go find it.
because it's really good.
Okay.
I know the author's name is Allison Cook,
Oh, yeah. I
and the
think I
book,
just read that book.
The Best
The
of You.
Best of You. Yep.
I'm really
Okay.
enjoying this book.
So good, right?
Yes. Yes. Let me see. I want to find the subtitle because it's just okay. The Best of You by Allison Cook. break free from painful patterns, mend your past, and discover your true self in God. Yes, it has been
Right?
very, very good for me in this season. And then I have to say scripture, and I know it's cliche, but like get in the word and see what God has to say about you because it is awesome. Like he loves you and admires you and he wants to woo you and win your stinking heart. Like, so just
Mm-hmm.
get in there and
Yeah.
discover that because there is nothing more healing than knowing that there's a bunch of people that kicked me out of their homes, but God says, I've created a room for you in a kingdom. And there's nothing more healing than people can put all these labels on me, but learning
Mm-hmm.
who God says I am and his opinion trumping every other opinion. Like people can say whatever they want about me, but I'm like, I'm a child of God.
Right. Well, and being able to read for yourself who Jesus was, that Jesus would not have done the things that that Donna did or that Sue did. Like
Yes.
that is not Jesus. That is not who he is in our lives or who he says we are.
Right.
So, yeah, preach. Love that. Okay, yay. I so appreciate your time here. And if you're ever in Washington State, you just, look me up because I would love to have coffee with you. I
I
feel
would
like
love
you are one of the coolest people I know. So,
You're so sweet. Thank you so much for having me. I so enjoyed this. This was
yes.
awesome.
Oh, good. Okay. Have a great day.